think he's done my speech for me. Hi, I'm Karen Wallace, and as he's... Oh, bottom one. As he said, I am a master engraver based in Scotland. So originally, I want to talk to you about how pattern is transmitted and also about the language of pattern, which predates, obviously, heraldry, which came later on as a different discipline. So this is the Cartier Award-winning piece, but we'll speak about that later. So in Scotland, we're known for carving and engraving. It's everywhere. We've got a very rich history, and these are the first marks to the pony symbol, and also the heraldry. But we as a people have a desire to mark for status and identity and also ownership. I was speaking earlier on about how the ancient graffiti that you find in the buildings in Rome are also, or even the markers that you find in Scotland on the standing stones, etc. And this is, I basically feel that heraldry has become a more sophisticated way of identifying that, and also how we transmit status in society. And it comes from a part of our history when people couldn't actually read, they were illiterate. So it was a way of communicating pattern work through, and we still use it today. We use it in that's a modern piece that I've done, but we have it all the way back to how we catalogue the Celts, and also in their tapestries and the Celtic knotwork that we had. So why do we decorate? I mean, we decorate everything. We've always wanted to decorate things, from our buildings to painting to wherever you go, there's always been decoration, and everybody's got an opinion on why we do it. I think it reflects power, faith and wealth, and also to create a sense of belonging, so that you have something that you associate or relate to within that situation. So that's why you see the signs of nature coming through. They're always repeated patterns. So from the swirling patterns to the modern day scroll work, it becomes a language that we communicate subconsciously to each other, and it transmits. That's really what I want to speak about, is our language, and the symbols before our words, and how we even use mark making in order to transfer colours, even in heraldry. So the lines and the dictation and engraving then explain like a colour. So when you would look at the picture, somebody would know what colours to paint it in by what the engraved pattern mark was at the back. So historically, engraving has been on all forms, not just in metalwork, from stone to woodworking. And obviously, I now engrave primarily on metal, and I specialise in deep relief carving. But again, I still have to follow all the rules. So if I'm doing a blue background, I still have to do the horizontal lines. I had a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago when he sent me something to engrave, and I had to send him it back in a black and white image and changed all his colourful drawing into different lines and dots. And he asked why I had done that, so I sent him over the pattern table so he could understand that this is something that's transferred throughout it goes across countries, so that everybody looking at it then knows what that colour represents. But we also have a language that we speak through pattern. So we have a very specific language in Scotland because we have our knotwork, which has obviously come from our Nordic inspiration, but we also have quite a lot of southern influence through scroll work. And then we also have this continual spiral, our Pictish motifs that come through, which we still see everywhere today. And my belief is that we absorb this language subconsciously as you're walking around through your culture. So we have a great understanding from it from such a young age that when we see something that's slightly off, we can tell it's off, but we don't quite know what's going on. So even if you look at something like the scroll work that you'll see in Scotland is slightly different from the scroll work in England. So the scroll work in Scotland is far more open. It's got, you can see that that's the Holyrood Parliament gates, or part of their gates. And also you'll see it all the way around Roslin Chapel. But when you go somewhere like France, their knotwork is more ornate, they have far more flowers in it. If you go to Germany, the scrollwork changed completely and it becomes a lot tighter and smaller. And I think it looks a bit more aggressive, but that's just my opinion. And it is all about how we make marks and what we do with our mark making. So traditionally we would have engraved using hammers and chisels. I still use hammers and chisels. I make them myself. I'll use little hammers and little chisels, and I tap, tap, tap away all day in my workshop and chip away at the pattern making. Now I have this ball vise that I use, but it used to be held within the hand or held in your legs, and you'd get a big bit of pitch and you would just hammer at it and kind of chip away at the pattern work. So we can see why the pattern has evolved. Sometimes it's to cover your slips and mistakes, and you can see that in many pieces. If you go to places like the Royal Armouries, you'll see somebody's, maybe the piece has had a wee slip. But even today, the same rules apply within the pattern making. So we have rules within scrollwork which we've never really taught people. It's just handed down through master to apprentice. Do you know, for instance, the largest scroll's the first scroll, and all the other scrolls coming off of that should decrease in size by the rules. They should also go from the one way to the next way. And heraldry is the same, and I've just learned all about the laws and how you get into trouble if you've not followed all the laws. But this is a language of pattern that has been prevalent from the beginning of time, and you can even see it in ancient times. And you will be drawn to things that don't follow the laws or the rules. And we were talking about that earlier on, walking down the street, and you'll see somebody's coat of arms and you think, oh, that's not right. It's the same for engravers. I think it regularly when I see things. And that is standard practice. So I try to follow the rules. I try to keep on top of the rules. I'm sure I break some, and you're always learning, and it's always good to be kept in check by your peers. But behind the pattern, there's many stories that we've continued about status and craftsmanship and what these stories engage you with. So every pattern begins with a single mark, and that records not just, and every mark is changed because your pattern will change as you start to do the commission or the job. You'll change your pattern because you'll take all the patterns you've seen before and you adapt it. So this was a pattern that I had done, this was the first ever gun that I carved from scratch, which I look back and don't think is very good, but I'm sure at the time I thought was fantastic. But again, it's always harking back to these continual patterns that you see throughout history. And I even look back at these paintings and see, particularly when I go to the armories and I see these carvings, they were actually done, what would have been done, they would have been formed, then they would have been, somebody would have hammered it out, and then somebody would have sat with really fine wire or gold sheet, and they would have hammered the gold sheet on top of it, and that's what would have given you the gold imprint. And it's amazing now that I don't think that these could be achieved now with our technology, because I think that we've actually lost the language of pattern when we teach now. It's something that, we teach people technical skills and we give them all these machines, but we actually don't teach them about how to form a pattern or what the rules are until they break them. Which leads me nicely on to how I came into engraving. And that was through the Master and Apprentice programme. So I had went to Glasgow School of Art and come out of Glasgow School of Art as an academic and realised that I knew absolutely nothing about the world or pattern or making metal. And you could fulfil a project, but you actually didn't understand how to make things for people or understand that. And I did an old school apprenticeship as a goldsmith for a couple of years, and then I quit and was driving a big blue tractor, and one day I decided I was going to become an engraver because there wasn't very many of them, and I thought, if I can do that, I'll have a job. So I was on the internet, I was driving this tractor, and I came across Malcolm Appleby, and I phoned him up and asked him if I could go visit him. So I went for an afternoon, and I think I was there for 7 years. And part of the training was the continual being beside somebody who is focused on the rules and focused on getting better. Every mark you get better. It's not, so there's a thing about when you start off as an apprentice. You think it's your first, you know, everything, you start it and then you get to the end of that piece and you think, that's really rubbish, you want to give up. But there's a discipline in having to finish every single piece, because yes, it's not as good as the next one, because you're going to, you know, obviously do the next one better, but you have to have the discipline to finish everything that you start, and a master is good at kind of at maintaining that. Malcolm is also an avid collector of everything. You've never been to a workshop like this in your life, you know. We hit from old parts of guns. His favourite thing to do was to go into an auction site, buy lots of guns, take them all apart, and then keep all the lot plates as references and give you a reference to copy, and you had to copy exactly to the size, to the mark, to the line, to build discipline so that you got that analytical eye of copy, repeat, and mastery. But he also was a collector of everything wild and anything wild. So one of my favourite objects in the workshop is actually a powder horn, and it tells the story of Samson and Delilah carved around it. But the horses have feet, and it's a very bizarre piece. Because I'm sure that these people had horses and they knew they didn't have feet, but the horses there had feet. So this is me working in my workshop, and I now have an apprentice called Annabelle Hood who came through to me through the Quest Scholarship, and has been with me for many years now, and she's becoming an engraver. She originally started as a silversmith at Edinburgh College of Art, and she's moved more into the engraving side of it, just because it's more challenging engraving and it's more rewarding. Do you know, once you can make things, you can make them, but how are you going to decorate them? And this year, earlier on this year, I managed to become a certified through the Gun Makers Association. So I went down to the Lady Mayor and got my certification, which was amazing, because if you've ever been in the Mansion House, that's covered in heraldry and covered in cornicing and everything. It's a phenomenal building. And it is about that kind of passing it on, and I think that's part of what heraldry does. It passes it on to the next generation, and it also holds people accountable. Do you know, you have to, in order to achieve this and be established and respected within that industry. And I think the coats of arms are very symbolic of that, because when you go and you have all the different guilds, they're all behind their coat of arms. It's quite a magical experience. It also creates your lineage from me being Malcolm's apprentice to then I'll have my apprentice, and hopefully one day she'll go on to have an apprentice. So it keeps our crafts alive, which is it's difficult when you're trying to do something which is actually endangered. Hand engraving has now been listed on the UNESCO Red List of Endangered Heritage Crafts. So we do have a it's really necessary for us to preserve it in any way possible. But the problem I think that we have in a hand engraving craft is that, especially for gun engraving and all engraving, is that it takes so many hours to master it, to get mastery of something. Do you know, you have to cut so many lines, and I still frequently make mistakes. But I think that the thing about being a master is that you learn to fix your own mistakes. That's the only difference between a master and an apprentice. You can fix the mistakes they make without anybody having to find out. And sometimes I do have to ask for help. I always joke that I had to buy a laser because I kept on putting holes in things, and that's only partly not true. I did have to fill up holes many a time. But the pursuit of mastery is something that I am still pursuing. I still want to be better in every single thing that I do. So I constantly take on challenges that are far too big for me and projects that I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to finish or complete. And this watch was one of these projects. It's on stainless steel, and stainless steel is incredibly difficult to cut, and it's carved, and it's in a very small scale. I learned a lot by doing this one. I got punished a lot for doing this one. It took a lot longer than I had hoped, and it was a lot more painful than I expected. But as you can tell, I would like to say I don't put myself into these situations very often, but I put myself in these situations all the time. So the pursuit of excellence. Excellence comes down to the small details, and it comes down, and you're only achieving these small details through persistent and continual practice and the discipline of keeping on going when things get tough, and also working around your problem. In heraldry, I have a project on the go at the moment, and I'm intending on three-dimensionally cutting something which should be cut in a very large scale, which I intend to do in a very small scale, which will be very challenging. But this is why we do these things, to push us forward and to become more disciplined and better. Because after you've done something like this, going back to do something on a bigger scale becomes really easy. So, okay. We'll move on to the Jacques Cartier Awards, which you touched upon. So in 2023, well, that's a funny story. I actually was given that rifle plate, but it was plain, and COVID happened, and I decided that I would engrave it not with the pattern that was commissioned, but just a pattern I wanted to do. So I engraved the rifle plate, and then a competition came up, and I sent the rifle plate off to the competition. Not thinking anything of it, just thought I'd get a thank you for applying, and it's sent back in a couple of weeks' time. I didn't. I got an invitation to this big night in London for the following year, and I attended thinking, oh, that will be nice, I'll get a nice little certificate for my wall, and went down only to discover that it had won the Jacques Cartier Award for exceptional craftsmanship. The Jacques Cartier Award is not given out every year, so in order to be eligible for the Jacques Cartier Award, you have to have won a gold in your specific section. So for engraving, I had won the gold for that piece, and then you go into a pool of all the other gold winners, of probably 30 to 50, and they discuss whether or not it's at a Cartier level. And if they feel that it's at a Jacques Cartier level, then they can award it. So out of the 64 times it's been eligible for award, it's maybe been handed out in 47 or something. So it's quite a big deal. Problem is, I hadn't told my client I'd entered it into a competition. I certainly hadn't told my client I'd entered it into the Jacques Cartier Award and won the gold. And I had to then try to frantically phone my client in the evening to tell him, and he didn't answer his phone, so I had to run across London at 8 o'clock on the next morning to chap his door before anybody contacted him. He, of course, was delighted to get a nice certificate in the Goldsmiths Hall, which is again covered, shrouded in all these heraldic symbols, because it gives you the prestige. And you get a lovely little gold book to take home with you, which is delightful. It sits in my house. I always joke I'm going to have to win another one so my children can't fight over it, or they'll have to split it in two, because I've got two children. I could wait my whole life to have won the first, so I should be grateful that I got one. But the thing is, I didn't win the Jacques Cartier Award. I come from a lineage of hundreds and hundreds of years of people who have been scratching, chipping away at things, and carving up metal. I just happened to be the person that put a piece into the award and got a nice little shiny for it. It's not me that won it, it's Malcolm, the person who taught Malcolm, who would say he was self-taught, and the person who taught them. It's also all that heritage and history, and we are I'm very, very privileged to have been lucky enough to every single person that I've approached for help or advice has always opened the door, and it's always been extremely generous with both their time and also their information. I can't stress that enough. It doesn't just go to me it goes to all these people along the way that has helped me throughout my entire career, and also my learning journey, and even more when I've made a mistake and I've needed them to help me fix it, which has been often. And I'll give you an idea, that's not the first time the set of R's been put on there. First time they were put on squint, so they had to be removed and recut. But I'm very honest about my mistakes. I think it's important for other people to realise that you're human too, and that you know, nothing's perfect. Because if you tell students particularly, they come in and they get very frustrated when something is difficult, and I always say to them, but you didn't learn to walk in a day. You didn't learn to talk in a day. You only came in here at 9 o'clock. Why would you expect to be able to do this by 12? If you could do this after 3 hours, what was the point in me training for the last 11 years to 13 years to learn it? So, and I've dedicated now 23 years to getting to this stage, so I'd be really annoyed if they could do it in the morning. I'd employ them. It's a very time consuming, it's a very difficult thing. And also, sometimes you can have somebody who's technically very strong, but they're let down on their pattern or their lack of understanding of patterns. So there has to be that desire to take in everything you see. And also, you will copy it. Do you know, I find myself, I am the worst. My phone camera roll is just full of pictures of cornices. And, you know, gates and like leaves and anything I see. You know, I'll take a picture of anything that's got a nice pattern on it. I go to old houses and castles and just take pictures of all the fine details. And then it filters through my work. And I'm always trying to get that perfect flow of you know, the scroll work or the perfect curve. And it's always a wee bit on there, because we all are. It's getting a bit better. So it's about these hundreds and hundreds of decisions that you make every day when you're cutting a piece. It's not just the initial decision of what you're cutting, but it's how you decide to cut it and the tool that you use. I was going to give you a bit of a demonstration as well. So I didn't, you know, I thought that, I mean, you may as well see me chopping up some metal and also handle some metal, because rather than it just being, it's a very tactile subject matter. So I did a little bit about me and what I think. So it would be quite nice if we could do more of like a questions, and I can do a demonstration. You can come up, you can handle some of the tools and things if you want to, and handle some of the objects. So it's just a wee bit more, you know, show and tell. And you can also see the depth and just the understanding of that. Like I say, I do quite a lot of heraldry, but it's not primarily my thing. My thing is pattern, and I think it might be part of, I'm very dyslexic, but even when I do heraldry, I actually just think of it as just a different pattern. So I kind of treat it, you know, I like to do it from upside down, from sideways, just whatever feels right for me. So I have these things, and then I can show you the different tools, and then we can talk through them, and these are also the recent pieces that I've made. So I do heraldry. That is a wine sleeve my client brought to me, and he gave me a list of all the things that meant something to him. And I was to fill this whole wine sleeve in them, and we covered it. So if you look in the fish's mouth, he had initials of people that he was cared about. So the bubbles all have their initials in them. So it was all symbols from his family, from his past, from, you know, he's from Dunfermline, and, you know, so we had all this. It's quite a spectacular piece. He says he's going to leave it to the National Museum of Scotland. The Cartier gun is a bolt action rifle, and again, this was me not knowing how to keep my mouth shut. I thought this would be really good if I could set diamonds in the bolt with the logo of the company, which was increasingly difficult as the time went on, because the steel was hard and the diamonds are very small, and so we had to get specific diamonds. We got specific sapphires, and then they put it in this really hot vat of this tar liquor. I don't know what they did with it, and they all started to fall out. So that gave massive anxiety. But as well as that, I do a lot of the pattern making. So this is something that Malcolm is notorious or famous for, infamous for, is we carve lots of foliage or feathers in this case. So that's a piece. If anybody has any questions on anything, then we can ask. That would be great. And we can, and this is, thank you for listening to this bit, and then we can have a look at the tools and things, and you can have a wee idea of what we do. So we would initially, we have different shapes. These are, you can hand these round. They come in all different shapes and sizes. And so for different cuts, we shape them in different ways. So some are curved, some are pointy. We make the handles ourselves. And then we have two ways. I use a mixture of hammer and chisel and hand cutting. So we initially start, and then we can hand cut the pieces. So you can handle all of these. These are all just objects for you to. This is based upon the pony mask that you see up there, so it's a pattern taken from that. That's a work in progress. And then these are carved relief. You can handle them. Uh-huh.
Have you thought about decorating the gun?
You must do enough much of setting out of it. You don't end up with half a scroll on the other side.
Actually, what we tend to do is I draw on with a black marker pen, and so we'll draw on. This is a grid pattern. So I drew all the lines. You can see it once it's pointed out. You can see it, but it's actually a really good technique. Is draw on with a marker pen and then leave it so it sits, because sometimes I have a habit of breaching into things and then regretting it. So I like to draw it on first and then leave it in the workshop to see if I still like it in a couple of days' time. And then you start to cut.
And are these especially hard tool steel?
I use carbide steel now. I used to use, that's just high speed. When I started with Malcolm, we used to use on silver or copper tumblers, we would use some farrier nails and old bits of steel nails, and I think that's what they used to. Have you ever seen the forget-me-nots? They're all engraved.
And did you have to harden them by tempering them?
Yes, harden and temper. It's a painful process.
And do you hit it with your hand, or is it always a hammer?
I do a mixture of both. So I do hand pushing, and then I do, for the deeper, particularly steel work, I would do the hammer and chisel. And then we've got this big ball vise, and it goes in here. Put them in here, but we do a mixture of both.
Have you ever come across a technique the Incas used called depletion
What's
gilding?
that? No.
Depletion gilding.
No, what's that?
They would create something which was an alloy of copper with a little gold in it, like a plate, which is the same all the way through. And then they would put acid onto the gold, the surface, so it dissolved the copper and you were just left with the gold.
Oh.
They then hammered that down, so it looked as if the whole thing was made of gold. But it was actually a micron thick.
So that would be, they now do this, you electroplate it, so it's probably, it would be a modern.
So the Spanish would find these big gold objects, take the whole thing, they would melt them down, and it was a micron of gold on top of copper.
It's quite amazing though, that how would you have
They
developed
were
that?
tremendous metalsmiths, but they had never found iron, because it was always just bronze, copper, silver, gold. Amazing people.
It must be very difficult to get the actual point or edge on it when you're trying to sharpen it.
Constantly
Well,
wearing it away.
the steel you wear it away, and the gold and silver is actually a lot easier because you can use it's softer, so you don't have to do it so often.
Stainless steel must be
But
incredible.
the stainless, so everything feels different. Steel's lovely to cut. See, when you cut nice steel, it cuts like butter. Stainless steel work hardens as you cut, so when you start to cut it, it almost gets stickier as you go through.
Do you have
So
to sort of temper it again then? Or
no, you just have to keep on, because you can't, because it's work hardening itself. It's actually work hardening from the
soften
cut.
it again, but
No.
tempering it?
So I would be reluctant to to heat any of my pieces once they come to me, because there would be movement on them and they might not then work because you've got screws and things that have to go into them.
Could you use the same techniques on gemstones?
Well, I actually did try to cut gemstones because the other week, well, that was a couple of months ago, and it was easy for me to cut, but I wanted to do sapphire, which I found was really hard, and it blunted my tools. So I also have diamond tip tools that I use. So because you're taking the metal down, I go to a depth on my carving of about 0.7 to 0.9, but physically taking out 0.7 to 0.9 of metal every day was destroying my arms. So I started to use, I love going to my dentist. I don't know if my dentist loves it, because I go in and I think, oh, what do you have? Let's see your drill bits. And he was very kind and he gave me a wee catalogue once. So I now have diamond tipped burrs and things, dentist burrs, you know, and I can drill them out because I've got quite accurate with that. So I've got,
Stones, I would imagine you couldn't
can't shatter it. But what? So I was doing the diamond rotary, but do you know then, because I got my laser for filling all the holes that I make. I shouldn't joke, but I do make holes frequently. It was after the R was going and I had to fill it up. I thought maybe I need to buy something to help me with this, so I don't have to go tailing myself and put my hand up to misbehaving. So I actually lasered the outline and then finished it with the diamond burrs. So, and that actually worked. So it just gave me enough of a form to then go in with the diamond burrs, and you know. But I think that the thing that they do when they're carving out, you know, the cameos and things, I think they actually use, maybe it's underwater or an oil, and they reduce the shattering. So I would love to, that's on the long list of please take me, show me how to do that, and I would love to try it.
Ductile, whereas these are brittle. Gemstones are brittle.
And I also like the idea of doing it on the cabochon stone so that you can have it shining through. Oh, are you okay?
Missed. It's just that.
Oh, don't worry about it. It would have been fine if it would. It would be fine if, I mean, I shouldn't say I dropped. And
A pistol that hasn't fired.
This is an anvil.
this is a diamond lap. So it used to be the oil stone, but the problem with the oil stone is as you polish with the oil stone, the stone is obviously wearing away, and then the angle on your tool changes. And I always say to students, half of the problem is the problem that they've not got a consistent tool, and it puts them off because every time they then cut, there's a variation. So they're thrown off every time they cut their tool because it's slightly different. It's a bit like trying to learn every time but with a different pen or pencil. It's quite difficult for them. So the diamond tool gives you a much more consistent, a diamond lap gives you much more consistent, and there's less variation. You can also get them in tiny little files now, which is really useful. So you can, if I was getting a student who was on limited money, I start them off, which I do regularly. I've got a girl coming to me just now once a month from Edinburgh College. I'm open to any visitors. People can come anytime they like. I mean, it's Portobello. So everybody's...
Portobello. I live near there.
Well, you're more than welcome. You can get in touch and pop along to the workshop. Yeah.
Right.
I'm happy because I think that then people get to see it in action. And I think that more you can get it out there and allow people to handle things.
Is it off High Street and so on, is it?
No, I work from home. So I have a home
Might
workshop.
have a separate workshop. Right?
Yeah, so I have a home workshop, and I managed to whinge a big 10-ton fly press off of a man in a shipyard. And when my partner lured me over to the east and the west, I had to bring Stampy with me. So he had to build me a workshop for my first love.
How do you say, very delicate hands, you've not got calluses or anything like that. How do you protect your hand when you? Because you must have to use pressure.
Well, that's why
not to steel and stuff.
Well, that's why I do now have the power tools as well. I use anything and everything, but that's why we do the hammer and chisel.
Yeah, I just imagine. I look at your hands. There's no calluses that I could see on.
Well, I feel like I've got big, strong hands.
You've got big hands, but they're delicate hands. You think it's not like horny handed, full toil type of thing.
But it's a very lovely craft to work on. I remember when I first trained with Malcolm though, I used to get really frustrated because we would sit at the workshop would be silent, and I would hear him, and it would be all these wee flicks, and I wasn't doing flicks, and I was thinking, how am I not doing flicks? And I would say, I'm not making the same noise as you, and he would say to me, it'll come, and then see when I started to hear the flicks, I was, oh, that's very good. And I think in the workshop there's a level of silence. See, when things are, you can feel tensions, you know, when something's not going right, and then there's this nice harmonic, everything's got a rhythm, and there's almost like a hammer rhythm. You're working at a certain way, the other person comes into a rhythm, and it's quite nice. There's like this melody in the workshop when you go into it, and everybody's flicking. And it's funny when the student came round, and I can remember her on our third visit, and I was like, what is wrong? And she said to me, I'm not making that sound. And I was that person. And it's funny, it goes full circle. I was in London last week, and I was speaking to who we call is the godfather of engraving, a man called Ken Hunt. He is a phenomenal engraver. He kind of revolutionised this gun engraving of our time, modern engraving, and he's really shaped it. And he was telling the story about when he was an apprentice and he wasn't making the flicker noise, and I was like, see? So I think we all have that little thing that where it starts to flow and it becomes more natural.
So how's the original of this made? Is it a forging or a
They are
casting?
now they're CNC. Originally they would have been forged out of a lump of metal.
So it's been cut out from a solid lump of metal using
CNC
diamond.
now, yeah.
When you were at Glasgow School of Art, did you work on metal as part
Yes,
of your
I did silversmithing and jewellery, and so that was, and I learned a lot. I shouldn't joke and say then I learned how much I didn't know, but you learn a lot in context of that project. You don't learn a lot in context of a transferable series of skills, because you're not making enough mistakes. You're also not, you don't have a master next to you that corrects even just the way that you learn to file or the way that you saw. Do you know, there's definitely a discipline that you learn from watching somebody else handle the tools, because you're just kind of going at it, hoping for the best and hoping you get a mark. But when you have that steady person, there's a method to it, and then they'll pick you up for little things, or they'll give you hints or tips, or just use it this way or hold it this way. And that really does shape how you become a master. And I'll even say that to my apprentice. I'll say, I'm going to show you how I do it. Somebody will do it a different way, and then you're going to evolve and do it your own way, and that's also that's what should happen. Do you know, it's not just about how I do things, because my way might not suit her. She might have another strength or another, do you know, a way of holding it, and we both get the same result. But you have to learn everybody's way first. And I think that now a lot of the engravers, particularly in America, and I hark back to this language of like pattern, but we have such a massive history of it, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and that's what I was trying to stress by going back to these ancient carvings in stone. And when you have a new civilization who doesn't have that same pattern history, and you start to see their engravers, you can really see that that's taken without context, because we see it all the time in our ironwork and, you know, and our ancient texts and things. So it becomes ingrained into your psyche. You see it. Whereas when you see a culture where it's maybe not as prevalent, they don't see it when they're walking down the street on buildings, and it doesn't translate a lot. So when they might be technically very strong, but I do think that there is a lot of work that we should do on just documenting rules and, you know, transferring it, and that discipline of, because it's okay to break the rules as long as you know you're breaking the rules. And you consistently break the rule, but if you kind of break it here and break it there and don't break it there, when you don't understand, then I think that's where there becomes more of a problem.
Is this an epoxy resin?
This is Thermalock. It's the wonder of the age, I call it. So we used to use the shellac, and you see it there. I don't use shellac because shellac chips the top of your tools. So old engravers and old stone setters will still, I'm trying to convert them all slowly, But this is like a plastic, so you can put it in hot water, you can put it also in a microwave, and it just becomes like a putty, and it's very malleable, and then it hardens as it sets, so you can shape it to different objects, which means that if you're holding something that's a wee bit more obscure, it's quite easy to...
Soften it again, heat it.
Just heat it in a torch. I've had this probably for 10 years. Thermalock. And you can buy it in big bags. It's brilliant.
Is it powder?
No, it just comes in wee strips,
Putty.
like putty. You can put it in hot water, but the only thing, if you're putting metal on it, you have to sweat just heat the back of the metal just with a heat gun or just something so that you can sweat the oil or residue.
That's what on the television is like. See, it's called the repair shop, and there is watched it. But there was some jeweller repairing a ring, and he had like a wad of it, and he just set this ring into it so he could work on the top of the ring.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I use it quite a lot. You can also make moulds for it, and then you can use them to,
Casting.
Well, not so, but just pressing. You could maybe press into it. So it's quite a handy.
One of the interesting ones, going back to what you said about this passing sort of things on, actually, the man who's standing behind you will know it, and you had one earlier on, was actually coins. Because of course, if you look at the ancient coins, the engravers there were just so phenomenally skilled. And then it disappeared, and it disappeared all the way around the world. It wasn't just in the UK. And again, we know the things you'll see. The Scottish coins, they're very crude, and you go back to the sort of Celtic period, whereas those 500 years before that, there was stacks of engravers, and there must be a story that the last one closed the door and didn't pass it on, because the coins are, I think, probably the best one that I can think of to show where there was phenomenal skill, and it just disappeared. It vanished.
But the problem we have is the fact that for a long time, what would happen in the industry is you would train in a house with a master. Then you'd kind of pass out, and you'd probably go set up your own workshop by yourself, and you'd work as a person. And you wouldn't really want to share your information, because you thought if you share it with them, then they're going to go away and steal your work, right? So now we've got a stage, like you say, in our industry, where you've maybe got 50 years of people doing this. And then people will come to me and say, well, why have we lost? Why is there no engravers? And I'll say, well, because nobody wanted to share anything with anybody. And it's very difficult when you've got young people coming in and people are giving it all this. And they won't tell any, what's your tool I'm using? I'm not telling you my tool, and and I'm not telling you what that's called. And we now have a stage where all these engravers have now got older or elderly, and they're desperate to pass on the skills now, because they've seen that they've missed this whole cycle of it.
You find that similar at the British Museum with that for coins, because people used to collect coins and they don't now, and they're starting to get to that stage where they then look for somebody to give them advice about that, and they're stuck, because in fact the young people aren't taking it up in the same way. So exactly that sort of thing happens. The other thing that they used to do, certainly is a later period, there were restrictions in terms of, for example, for the UK, you couldn't move outside. It was illegal to do that. So if you go back to the 17th century, the 16th century, there were restrictions on you doing things, huge fines. So if you were an engraver, actually mainly to do with the shipbuilding industry, things like that, a skilled trade.
That was the original of the guilds. You weren't allowed to move to the next town.
But there was,
You had to stay in your own.
But you see that with quite a lot of organisations now are starting just to hit that barrier. That the people have come to the ones, if you go to them, if kids aren't collecting or learning to engrave.
We're talking about on the TV, all the young people that are unemployed, and I don't know what I'm trying to say. They don't sort of think they can do something as beautiful as that. They just thought, I just sit at a computer keyboard and do it. I'm not expressing very well, but
I think the problem is that it takes a lot of resilience. You need to be rubbish for a really, really, really long time, and you need to be comfortable being quite rubbish, and you don't get better for a really, really, really long time. And when I mean a long time, I mean years. Like it's not comfortable going in every day and being rubbish at something. And then you think it's really good, and then you look at somebody else's and you realise how really rubbish it is, and so it can be quite soul destroying. But I think that's the other thing about when I had Malcolm, because he was so such a wonderful, he is a wonderful person, but he is such a wonderful master, is he gave you things that were challenges, like pick a lock plate and copy that exactly. But he also, on the second hand of that, he would do design patterns or put things that were just a smidgen above your level, that you just had to reach for, do you know, that was, do you know, and he would just do that again and again and again, and he would correct it and he would do it again and again. So you were always just getting that slightly, this is hard, but you can do it. And then you would get that little win, and then he would have another little win, and that would build you up. And then you eventually started to be able to do the whole thing. And I think that's the difference between what they miss as a master, because a master was really just to hand bits over. So you might engrave the gun, and you might just get the pins to do, or you might just touch this bit that's, do you know, this repair up for me.
Many years ago, I worked in the stationery trade. They still had die stamp printing and copper plate printing, which is just straightforward letterings, or maybe it's some little decoration, but not as complicated as that. That people learn their skills. Just the copper plate obviously is softer metal, but the die stamping was on hard steel, sort of like half an inch thick. I think it's really done now. I don't think there's...
I used to work for the Geological Survey, and we kept this map plate in copper that was this size to print maps. And of course it was all engraved in reverse.
Yeah.
That's even more difficult than doing it the right way round.
Like
The
seals,
writing's
of
all in
course.
reverse.
Seals have to be in reverse.
I think those are the most impressive ones. If you do hand, you know, the hard stone seals. I've got a couple of ones and they're that size. Now this is about 1770, and it's got the full coat of arms with supporters and the motto, Tria Juncta in Uno. And once you put it on, there it comes. And you think, and I've seen some correspondence with engravers saying, I'm going to lose my eyes if I do this. So it will cost you another 50 quid in the money of 17 whatever, because presumably they use optical stuff to do, magnifying glass, that to do. Whereas now they do reducing machines. If you go down to the Royal Mint and you see how they do things, instead of that's at scale.
No skill in that.
I remember at a stamp exhibition watching a stamp engraver, so engraving a tiny little postage stamp at actual size and in reverse. Incredible.
But then I think it's how you're trained. It's a bit, they won't see that, they probably won't see that as letters. They'll just see it as a pattern, do you know, that they've got to achieve.
It must be your eyesight as well. Do you wear
Well,
glasses?
I work under a microscope. I'm very spoiled. I don't, you know, I love my microscope because
You can't see, you can't work.
you can't see, but also the microscope forces you to sit properly. So the other thing that a lot of engravers, they would have they had these big sandbags and they would be sitting pushing, and it's obviously causing a lot of repetitive strain. And then you've got your eye, and they would have one eyeglass in, and it would be, and so it's not conducive to a happy working life. So in order to keep it, you know, health and safety and things, we have the ball vise, and then you do everything you can to possibly help yourself. I mean, it still is a strain when you're working on something tiny under the microscope. Sometimes I find myself working on things that are maybe half a centimetre by half a centimetre, and I spend hours doing it, and I'll be so proud of myself, and my partner will come in and say, I can't see that. And I'll be like, well, it's really good.
It's fun to write backwards as well.
It's really good.
Occupational hazard.
Do you know, and there's one of the best-selling engravers that I know is Megan Rigby, and that's what she specialises. She does the signet rings and things like that. She's fantastic. And she's young coming through. Tends to be more prevalent in places like London because they have more of it getting handed down. The rings being handed down generationally. So it's quite good.
Roughly what proportion of engraving is done your way as opposed to doing it with a laser?
I would say that more now people are using lasers. I would say that out of most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference between lasers and hand engraved. Like trade work, I now work in bespoke pieces that are basically, I mean, the clients know it's going to take a long time and they're coming to you because they want something hand engraved. But I would say that the problem is that even now a lot of the signet rings and things and the seal cutting is now done in laser because they can do it now, so they can drop that at that different depth. So, which is helpful, but the problem is you lose that variation of cut and that kind of I can even tell if the engraver was right or left-handed. And I can see, so I'll get bits in and I'll say that one person engraved this and one person engraved the trigger plate and one person engraved the lock plates, just because there is that slight variation.
Just like handwriting.
Yeah, like handwriting. And because you're looking at it all the time, and you can even see who was the engraver. So you get into a way of saying, oh, that's so-and-so's work, because of the way, I know, because I can tell Malcolm's work going past on a bus, right? But I actually was driving one day and I seen a woman wearing a brooch at the side of the road, and I said, that's Malcolm brooch. Of course you can, yeah. So I can tell the difference, and scroll work is a bit like handwriting. Everybody will have their way. Also, seal engraving will have a technique that people, they'll just, the way they finish it or the way they do the hair and things like that, and it will become, you'll start to see it if you look at it carefully, and you see it often.
Do you know what in your work shows your unique identity along those lines?
All the mistakes. I'm sure that people can see it. I'm sure it's hard for you to see your own style. I do know that people say that I have a bit of, my scrolls tend to be more rounded. Some people make them quite sharp and quite geometric. I quite like mine to be smoother. It's just personal preference. Also depends what you like to look at. Like, I try to stay away from looking at metalwork, and I try to look at more cornicing or stone carving and tapestries, because I think that if you become what you see all the time. So it's quite nice to take something else into it that has the same reference, rather than it being fundamentally just the metalwork, or then all the metalwork becomes the same and we all just look the same, which would be really dull.
That's amazing. So you're a very tiny grade blacksmith.
Well, yes. Although I do have all the kit and caboodle, so I could probably go bigger if I wanted.
What is the biggest thing that you've done?
I have, when I worked with Malcolm, he got the commission to do the candlesticks for St Giles Cathedral. So he used to get the big pieces of silver and he would draw on them with a black marker pen. And then he would give me it was a much bigger hammer than this, and a big chisel, and I would whack it out. And that's what I'm saying, it would be handed over. He would monitor you, but he would help. He designed it for your ability at that time. But then you took a massive leap from doing that to like the next level. So that's quite nice. I don't know if I really fitted the brief, but
Handed the business cards out. I'd love to visit the workshop.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like a hole when you sharpen the woodworking chisel, you find it ends up
Yeah.
a groove like that. You use the same bit all the time.
I was a wee bit nervous. I felt better once I got my tools and things.
Probably using it every day. Attached to your hands.
I hope that was all right.
I do a lot of joinery and carving, stone carving and stuff like that. Just different materials, of course, different scale.
Take your seats for a while, and can I ask Kevin to propose the vote of thanks?
To have in our midst today someone who's absolutely a master of their craft, and also passing it down through generations, is such a privilege. And for me, from an artistic side, to see that talent and to see it through its paces, and for you to be brave enough to bring in work semi-completed and actually show us the process, is such a privilege. Thank you. The noises that you were saying in the studio were replicated here today, and we're all very much in appreciation of that. And if I can ask everyone to show their appreciation.